Good evening, everyone. My name is Silas. Welcome to Brookline Booksmith's author event series, and welcome to our new event space up here. A few housekeeping notes. Thank you for keeping your phones on silent. If you haven't picked up a pre-ordered book or you want to buy a book, we'll still be doing that after the event in the back, so no worries. And there will be time for Q&A, so get your questions ready. We're here tonight to celebrate the release of The Other Side of Infinity with author Joan F. Smith. With our moderators and fellow authors Laura Taylor Namey and Allison Bitz. Allison hails from Lincoln, Nebraska, where she lives with her spouse, 2 kids, and various rescue pets. When she's not writing a novel or a song, Dr. Bitz is helping clients in her private counseling practice, planning some form of political action, or trying to track down a pastry to enjoy with her coffee. The Unstoppable Bridget Bloom is her debut novel, and it comes out next week. Welcome. Laura is the New York Times and international bestselling author of A Cuban Girl's Guide to Tea and Tomorrow, The Library of Lost Things, When We Were Them, and 2 forthcoming titles. A proud Cuban American, this former teacher writes young adult novels featuring quirky teens learning to navigate life and love. She holds a BA in elementary education from the University of San Diego and is the winner of the Peggy Miller Award for Excellence in Young Adult Fiction. Welcome, Laura. And Joan F. Smith is the author of The Other Side of Infinity and The Half-Orphan's Handbook, a dance instructor and a former associate dean of creative writing. She received her MFA in creative writing from Emerson College. Joan lives and writes in Massachusetts, where she was the 2021 writer-in-residence at the Milton Public Library. When she's not writing, she's either wrangling her kids, embarking on a new hobby she will quickly abandon, or listening to podcasts on a run. Welcome, Joan.
Thank you.
The Other Side of Infinity is a YA novel where a teen uses her gift of foreknowledge to help a lifeguard save a drowning man, only to discover that her actions have suddenly put his life at risk. It was supposed to be an ordinary day at the pool, but when lifeguard Nick hesitates during a save, 17-year-old December uses her gift of foreknowledge to rescue the drowning man instead. The action comes at a cost. Not only will Nick and December fall in love, but also she envisions that his own life is now at risk. The other problem is that they're basically strangers. December embarks on a mission to save Nick's life and to experience what it feels like to fall in love, something she'd formerly known she'd never do. Nick, battling the shame of screwing up the rescue when he's heralded as a community hero, resolves to make up for his inaction by doing December a major solid in searching for her mother, who went missing 9 years ago. As they grow closer, December's gift starts playing tricks, and Nick's family gets closer to an ugly truth about him. They both must learn what it really means to be a hero before time runs out. We're so happy to have Joan with us for the virtual launch of Half-Orphan's Handbook, and she's back here with us tonight. Welcome, Allison, Laura, and Joan.
Well, we're so excited to be here with Joan. I'm from San Diego, and Allison's from Nebraska, and we are so excited to be together. We are together every day, every minute of the day in our Twitter DM, where we do all things books. And none of us can write a book without the other two. So we just wanted to give you a glimpse in what it's like to be us and to have a conversation in our DM about books. That is what we do every day. And we're so glad to be here with you, and we're so glad that you're here with us. And we love this book. Allison and I worked on this book, cried over this book many times, went through title changes and all kinds of fun things, and we love it so very much, and we're so glad to usher it into the world and to share it with you. We're going to talk about some of the cool things that are in the story, and one of them being the spec element. Now, Joan's debut, The Half-Orphan's Handbook, is a straight YA contemporary, beautiful coming-of-age story. But The Other Side of Infinity features a wonderfully delicious spec element. And I would like to just have you explain maybe what that is and how that
Sure.
developed.
Awesome. Can everybody hear me okay? All right. So a speculative element is any kind of an element that makes something impossible. So anything that's a little fantasy or a little sci-fi, it's something in the world that really cannot happen. And like Laura said, my debut was just a straight up story. And this one has a little bit of the impossible in it, which is one of our main characters, December, can see the past, present, and future with one personal exception. Yeah.
Joan, do you want to talk about how that got into your book? Like, when you chose the spec element, what purpose did that serve for you?
It was a personal one. So I had just had my son, and I was very anxious about like, when was he gonna cry next, and when did we have to change his diaper, and all those like new mom anxious things. And I had the thought of like, what if I could know what was coming next? So I was like, okay, like then I would be able to sleep through the night and not check and see if he was breathing, or like when I'm gonna have to feed him next, I could actually fall asleep, and all those really fun new parent things. So I was like, oh, I will create a character who can do all of that and more. And she can. And then I kind of was like, oh, I would really want to know everything. And then by the end of writing the book, I was like, you could not pay me to know everything, because you gotta carry the world on the weight of your shoulders. And she does.
I remember when you brought that element into and introduced it to us, and then you're like, what do I do with this? But, and we figured it out. But can you talk about, now I know these and Allison knows these, what were some of the challenges in creating something that really doesn't exist? And you get to make all the rules, and that is a blessing and a curse. What was hard about that?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's been around for a long story that somebody just like keeps going on and on and on. And for December, that's basically everything, because she knows everything. December's big change though is like, you know, when you're watching a movie and you watch what's happening, but you're not feeling what the characters are feeling. That's exactly how she sees the world. And I think that when you're watching a movie, like the musical score kind of aids in that too. You're like, oh yeah, that's what the character's feeling. She doesn't have a musical score. So I really wanted to make sure that I worked to keep it fresh, and that she wasn't just like telling you, okay, this is what's coming next, this is what's coming next, because it's kind of how she sees the world. And that's why I actually chose to make it a dual point of view. So we've got December, who can do all these things, and then Nick, who is a lifeguard who cannot do any of those things.
This is a quick aside, but I just want you to all maybe take the perspective really quick of me and Laura, and maybe anybody who Joan brings this plot idea to. Like, I'm gonna write a character who knows everything that has happened, is happening, and will happen. And I just remember staring at the screen and saying, okay, Joan, like,
Sure, Joan.
let's do this. And she did, and it's a very impressive book, and I think you all will agree. But I think that's a good segue also into, there's a certain element that you really like to tackle when you write, and I think would be a good time to talk about that.
Sure. I like writing about questions that can't be answered. Like in my first book, a lot of what drove that was like, what happens when you die? And nobody knows. And I like to think about that stuff. And in this case, we've got December, who nobody has that we know of. But I like to think about like, what if somebody did? So those like big what if questions that really cannot be answered are why I like to watch movies and read stories and all that kind of thing. So, yeah.
Well, let's talk about some of the characters. We brought up December, all-knowing December, and Nick, lifeguard Nick. But I know that those two, we love them very much, but was not your favorite character to write.
No.
Details.
My favorite character is named Maverick, and he is Nick's best friend in the book. And he is like a 17-year-old who's taking organic chemistry at a local community college, and he wants to be a neurosurgeon, and he's addicted to nicotine gum, and he's just like, he was really fun for me to write.
How did you come up with Maverick?
I don't know.
That's okay, that's fair.
No, there is a book though that did inspire, because you had us read it. Did it inspire the story?
What was it?
She forget. This is literally what our day is like.
John Irving's A Prayer for Owen Meany was a big inspiration. It was one of my favorite books growing up, and still is today. I reread it actually like maybe 5 years ago.
What's Nick's last name, Joan?
Irving.
Okay.
Yeah, we all read it together. Like we do this.
She made us read it.
Yeah, we make each other read books that we think are like really important, and so we call it we call each other the tank, like think tank. It's kind of everything. So we do these tank book clubs, and Owen Meany was a big deal. Still quotable. We yell at each other in caps because that's how Owen talks in the book.
And, yes, that's right, because that's how Maverick talks to me. And
Yeah.
it should be a text
Okay.
message in the book.
Yeah.
He types in all caps.
Yep.
I did too.
I didn't forget. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about setting.
That's what I was going to say, but you say it.
I just said
Okay.
it. Okay.
How about setting? Okay, setting. The book is set in a suburb south of Boston, which I did grow up in a suburb south of Boston, and I also live in a different suburb south of Boston. I don't name which one it is, but a lot of the setting was drawn from the condo complex where I grew up. However, the condo complex where I grew up did not have a pool, and the pool is one of the most important parts of the story. Chapter 1 opens right in it. So we've got our lifeguard who both lives at the condo complex and lifeguards at the pool, and December, who is a recent arrival to the complex. So a lot of the things that I drew while writing it were definitely stemmed from that experience.
Everyone wants to know how long it takes to write books. That's one of the questions I get asked all the time. And I do remember you coming to see me for my book launch in 2019. And you hand wrote in a journal pages and pages of this book. And you brought that out the other day and I almost cried. Because it was just, yeah, because that's just any day. But
Yeah, I do my best writing on planes,
You
so
do.
that definitely helps, yes. This book was definitely an anomaly for me because I drafted it very, very quickly. The first draft I wrote in a 3-month time span, which is ridiculous for me. I take, in comparison to them especially, I take a long time to write a book. But the first draft of that was about 3 months, and then the revision process was a lot longer. I think it was maybe 2 years in and out. I was also preparing the Half Orphan's Handbook at the time and that kind of thing. I wrote the first draft of this book while my first book was out with editors, and I was hoping there would be a sale, and I was mad every day when I wasn't hearing anything. So I kind of like hate wrote this book initially.
basically publishing children.
Yeah. I love you, Kat, if you're watching.
Well, okay, so you just brought up your writing process for this book was a bit of an anomaly, but I really think it would be interesting if you would share with us more about your usual, like either this writing process for this or your usual way of going about it. I think that's all cool to hear, so tell us more.
Yeah, sure. You kind of get this too, but I call it the download, where I all of a sudden just the story. And so I'm writing a different book right now, and there is a 22-page, just like words all straight in a row of the day the idea came. I don't start writing something until I know how it's going to end, and I also don't, sometimes I start like playing around with the beginning, but I won't start really writing the book until I know the main turning points, and I do a big outline and everything like that too. And then I give myself big time permission to change my mind, because that happens a lot.
Yeah. Has your process changed since you started, do you think? Because I know mine has in working with you. Because I used to be a bit of a pantser. I just kind of go, I know the ending, but
So for the record, pantsing
yeah, that means
is
you
when
just write.
you just do stuff.
You have no
Like,
idea
there's
what
no
you're
rhyme or reason. You
It's
just
flying by the seat of
you
your
just
pants.
write, and
I know
then
the
there's plotting, which I'm pretty sure you all know what that is,
Yeah.
and then there's plantsing, which is
Yeah.
kind of like in the middle. So if you hear us using those words, that's
That's what it
we're doing.
I mean, I'm definitely a plotter, and I always have been, and I get on them to do it too.
I
We
plot.
listen.
I'm a plotter.
Yeah, I mean, we're better now.
No, I don't think it's changed that much. I mean, I think like I'm a little more gracious with myself when it comes to deviating, probably, but yeah, I don't know, maybe just.
I think there's there's the point when every author has gone over their book so many times that we absolutely despise it. Let's talk about that.
No.
That happens.
I think you have some quirks in your process.
Okay.
Like,
Well, we know them if she's not gonna.
maybe you don't still do this all the time, but I remember you, as Laura was talking about, like you've written so much of your books by hand. Not every author does that.
I also do a lot, I dictate a lot into my notes app. It was a lot once upon a time when the kids pre-pandemic were in daycare and I had time. I would drive to and from where they were at daycare and I would dictate in the car. And now if I'm stuck, I actually do that a lot on like walks and runs. So I still do dictate a lot, and I do a lot of like drawing of the plot before I, not like pretty drawing, but just kind of doodling it around to try to figure out like the shape of the story. I guess that's a little, something. But.
Lately, have you been getting, I don't even know this, and I talk to you every 5 seconds. Is it the plot itself or the character that is that first spark?
That I would say changed for me.
Okay.
Yeah, now it's definitely plot. Definitely. With my first book, I had the character for years before I ever had a story. And then with this book, definitely it came plot first, and everything I've started or written since is also plot forward.
I think that just happens with the more you go and the more you write. I think those first characters that we write, I know this happens to Allison too, we want to write about the things that have impacted us or people that we know, or we put that into a person. But then you run out of those. As you are writing your 4th, 10th, 12th book, we run out of people. And then we start to see different aspects of the world or ways to do that.
Yeah, and not to interrupt you, but I think also with my first book, there were so many obvious similarities between me and the main character. And then with this book, I was like, I'm going to create somebody who I definitely could never be. So, definitely
But
that.
that's the fun of it.
Yeah.
Well, something that I think is interesting to talk a little about, because it kind of feels like maybe you could give people a little peek behind the curtain, is like some of the things that you do as an author to help promote yourself. And so maybe you can talk about how social media looks for you now, or how you like to do your book stuff that way.
Well, there's all the main ones, we've got Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and all those, but I think it's dependent on the platform, but I'm posting a lot. I'm creating TikToks a lot now on, like, sometimes I do book promotion, but a lot of that is like writing advice and stuff like that. It's just like the world is moving so fast right now, and as the platforms change, authors need to really adapt in, I think, ways we never anticipated that we would.
Yeah.
And that was even more evident when my first book came out during the pandemic too, because we didn't have events like this during that time frame. So we really had to pivot and change to social media stuff then.
That was a really hard time. I had a book out that year too, and we write these things for you, and then we can't connect with you.
Yeah,
And
that's
brutal. It was brutal. Like the 2020, 2021 books were really tough, but
Yeah,
we still put them out.
but it's 23 now.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, what is fun about writing for you? In this book and just in general? What do you love?
I like figuring out what the plot twists are gonna be. That is always like really energizing, I think, for the process. I also really like if I'm gonna set something like not in my hometown or whatever it might be, I really like to travel and kind of observe and stuff like that. I also really like, I enjoy writing description. That's actually one of the only things I usually end up cutting from my books, because I tend to underwrite them as opposed to these two who are always writing way too much.
Yeah, we do. Joan, we have this thing, we call it Joan level.
Joan level.
Because she comes in levels our books, and also she has like this certain standard of living. It's Joan level.
Joan level
so-
yet? If it's not, you go back and
Yeah.
make it.
Yeah, it's a lot of refining. Joan will slash it.
Yeah, you don't need that
She
chapter.
will put the little, there are many, but the scissors emoji, that is one. The snip snip, or it's like a hat. Sometimes I think it's a hatchet.
There have been some painful things that have happened.
We're not bitter. But I will say about Joan is she is one of the smartest people I've ever met, and she's brilliant, and she understands just the way a book should work.
Yeah, Joan really has this deep, I think, intuitive understanding of story, which was something I think I'm an okay writer, but I really needed to learn a lot about story, and I learned a lot of it from Joan.
I mean, you guys can just take this if you want.
We love you.
This is your day, so yeah.
Okay. Another interesting thing that's kind of a behind the scenes thing is titling. So for this particular book, I think it would be informative if you'd walk us through that process, and then maybe we could talk about titling more generally.
Yeah, I know my flaws, and titling is one of them. I don't come up with good titles, and I accept that, and I did not initially come up with this one. This book sold under the title, It Ends with December, who is our main character.
Which is so clever. Sorry, Joan, I just have to interrupt.
But it didn't work, and that's okay. So now it's called The Other Side of Infinity, as I hope you all know. And all of us have just gone through so much retitling. I read this stat, and I talked about this online at one point, where 80% of the books that are sold wind up with a different title. And I did a really informal poll a couple weeks ago, and that seems to kind of ring true. I'm at 100%, so.
I've gotten to keep one.
Yeah.
And
I haven't got to keep any yet.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, there's like, speaking of like sales and marketing, publishing companies are smarter a lot when it comes to what the authors should be titling their books, because they know what the cover is going to look like. So for example, the word December is not a typical character name, it's a typical month name, it's a winter month. And this book, if you look at it, has a very summery cover, so it didn't make sense for that keyword December to flag summer. And that is something that just like never would have thought of that. So we've all like gone through every time an editor comes back to us and is like, hey, sales and marketing think that maybe you should be retitling, I hate to break it to you. We end up pitching titles for each other's books. We edit and story develop and everything so well together, I think. But
The titling thing will go on for like days.
It's
We
obnoxious.
need new title, and then we'll be talking about something else, and out of nowhere, in all caps, like a title.
And that's how we think, because a book will come out, any book before it publishes is always notated in all caps. And as soon as it's publication date, it switches to normal text, which is something I didn't know. But if you see that, it means it's not out yet. So when we're just talking, and then we'll just break into our new titles. I'm trying to retitle my 2024 book right now, and I will just put titles in there. We're just having a normal conversation about the weather and food and tacos, and it's like, this, do we like any of these?
and I'm like, no.
Yeah, it's terrible. And then sometimes when you're not searching for it, it'll pop up and it'll be magical or not.
I would say we do the same thing when we decide we have to name a character.
Oh, yeah.
Or rename a character, or a store or something.
Yeah.
No, it's, okay, I need a name for a marshmallow shop near the ocean that sells pink marshmallows only, go. And then I won't do it, they'll do it. But then we do theirs. So anything in our books are usually the names of things. We've each named other things, because sometimes you want to have something that's not in your realm to come into your book, and we want each other's Easter eggs in our books. We have fun.
Joan very flippantly offered a name for one of the main characters in this book that's coming out next week, and I just kept it. I was like, yeah, that'll work. And it's in there.
Yeah.
That's Duke.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
that was so smart of me.
It was brilliant.
What about if there are emerging authors that are watching online or here? What are some of your best writing tips?
Ooh,
And I want to know.
Read as much as you can. Definitely, as a parent to two small kids, we do limit screen time, but if you're a parent, like, it's okay if they watch movies and shows and stuff because it does help kids create story. Let's see, I really like reading outside of what I'm going to write. So if I'm writing something, I might read a memoir or, you know, my first 2 books are young adult, but my next one may or may not be adult. So I might read young adult while drafting adult. So I dip in and out everywhere, kind of. Definitely, I think one of my favorite tips from my MFA program was opening a book to any page and just retyping the paragraph that you see if it's a book you like, because it gets kind of the rhythms of the words in your head and that kind of thing. Yeah.
It can help with voice, I think.
Yeah, and reading craft books I think is really important too, which I've got lists of those. I won't list them.
Oh, yeah.
Joan's TikTok is actually very good for writing tips, so you should follow her there.
Thank you.
Oh.
We're at time.
Is 7:32.
Oh,
Okay, great. Keep going.
No, well, what can I tell you about stuff that she doesn't want me to talk about? Okay. Maybe, yeah, how do we work, if you're an emerging author, we always say find your people. And I think this is true in any industry, really, is find, few industries are really lone, that you need colleagues, and you need mentors and advocates, and
I mean, like, writing is such a solitary endeavor, right? Like, I'm sitting at, I mean, I've got broken barn doors that my husband has to move for me to sit down at my desk right now. Thank you. And if I didn't have them just like popping in and out of my inbox, I would just have myself. And I think having people to bounce ideas off of and be like, is this a good idea? Is this a bad idea? I'm gonna do it anyway, okay, but I'm gonna tell you when you hand it to me, it was still a bad idea probably, but go ahead. Just having those people definitely to like reflect off of. And I mean, the way that we met on a Twitter contest called Pitch Wars, which I think has since gone off into the sunset. But we were all alternates, so we met and connected through that, and then just slowly but surely, like, one of us got an agent, the next person got an agent, and then when we write our next book, that book goes out, we call it going out on sub, and we'll share editor feedback and be like, do you agree with this? Do you disagree with this? Like, what do you think? And okay, I'm gonna revise this whole thing. No, don't yet. Like, that kind of thing. So I think, like, we do a pretty good job of evening out one another, I think.
Yeah, it's nice. I mean, I just turned in my copy edits, and we get editorial feedback a lot, and it's so helpful, especially when you're doing line edits, and the editor will say, I don't understand this sentence, or can you rephrase this? And I'm like, this is so basically, it's like she walked into the room. What is not, we know. So I'll just copy it, like, does this make sense, or do we need to change it? Just having somebody that is not yourself, because you get caught up, and you've seen it 45,000 times, and having someone else that has not seen it that day, just to check yourself, it's just so helpful.
It's like a drive home, like where you can check out
Yeah.
on a routine drive home.
Yeah.
That's like, by the end of the process, you're staring at your book and like, I don't even know what I wrote. Like, why is the word through in this paragraph 14 times?
Right. You don't see it. It's
Yeah.
as much as we do spend time alone in our words over and over, day after day, it's being able to collaborate and take chunks and going, this isn't working for me, fix it, help me.
Yeah.
And then usually when we type that out, we've solved the problem just by speaking it or acknowledging it. But sometimes, I mean, Joan fixed my plot hole the other day. I've fixed plenty of hers too, so it's
Yeah.
fine.
No, she has.
I have.
Yeah.
And Allison is a brilliant doctor of psychology.
Yes.
And I mean, I don't do a character arc without running it by her. Like, is this normal if the character is going through this, that, or something else? Is that possible? Or
Yeah,
what?
it's helpful when one of your writing partners is a therapist.
Yeah, and just like, these behaviors are spot on, or actually she would present this way, or.
I was actually going to say something kind of therapist adjacent, which
Good,
is, so in my field, there's this thing called building rapport, which is when you establish trust with your client and they feel like they can come to you and, you know, say really personal things. And I feel like because we have rapport, and we've had rapport since 2017, there's something different that comes into my mind and my heart when I get critique from you. And that's not to say that when I get critique from other people, I don't work on that or take it to heart, but I I really, really trust Laura and Joan and their judgment and how they think about things and work through things. And so when they tell me something, it means something different than a random. And sometimes it means something more to me than even my editor. I'm not gonna lie, even though my editor's brilliant. But your guys' judgment's really key to me. And I think this thing that we've built in the tank is pretty special.
And it's nice to have a place where, I mean, you should see the things that we put in there that don't make it to print. They're terrible.
Yeah, they're
and
really
it's
bad.
like to have two people that you can be just so vulnerable with, because by the time you see something like this, and you know, it has gone through, it is not what it looks like out of our brains at the get-go.
No, I'm pretty sure
It's bad.
the other side of Infinity had at least 10 different drafts. If I don't number my drafts because I'm chaotic, but at least. And it took, I mean, like I said, it took 3 months to draft, but it took 2 years to revise for sure. And then by the time it was ready to go out, I only had to do a little bit to it to actually prep it for publication with the help of some really brilliant people. But yeah.
Yeah.
Are we good with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything that you would like to know?
Where's my audience plans?
Yeah. Oh.
I'm just kidding. I don't know one,
Now,
so you
anything
actually have
about
to
the book or about publishing, about writing, anything?
Talk about your relationship with your editor,
Yeah.
and how much they make changes, how often, submit things chapters at a time, and then do they make wholesale changes?
Yeah, so for fiction, you have to write the whole book first, with a few exceptions once you have a bit more of a track record. That's different than for nonfiction, which you typically prepare what's called a book proposal. But so when my book went out to Kat, it was fully written start to finish. And she came back and she said, I really like this and I really want to buy it. There is one thing in it that I think we should talk about changing. And that wasn't to say that like that was the only thing that needed to be worked on, but that there was like one sticking point. So that was one sticking point I brought back to them. And I was like, what do you think about changing this? And they were like, absolutely not, do not do it. And I was like, okay, but what I need to hear is that there is a problem with how this is in the book right now. So I brainstormed ideas around fixing that problem, and then I went back to Kat and I said, what about this? And she was like, that solves the problem. So the thing that happens is still in the book, but it is presented in a much different way than what I was not even intending to present it as in the first place. So her process is like, she goes through the whole book with the help of a really great person named Hannah too, and a few other people, but and we'll just tag different chapters within it and say like, I think this paragraph needs work, or like, you have the word through in this 200 times. There are not 6 Tuesdays in the month of June. Little things like that. And then any overarching things, you know. And then I send all that back. And then all of a sudden it arrives in your inbox and it's like formatted. And you're like, oh, this is what the book is gonna look like. And they're like, yep, here are all the queries in here, and adjust these and get it back to us in 2 weeks. And then my husband cooks dinner for 2 weeks, and then he then cooks it every night thereafter because it's so much better. And then I kick it back to her, and then she kicks it back to me, and then that process happens, and then all of a sudden you just never see it again until you get a big box of books on your doorstep.
And then you find all the mistakes.
Yeah, I can't even open it.
No.
Yeah,
Don't ever open it.
there's definitely mistakes in every book, so that's okay.
And editors, oh, this is an aside, if everyone asks, like, can you keep something like she did? Yes, but they will make it, it's like you can die on a hill, but sometimes you have to replant the hill.
Mm-hmm.
So you can say, if you really want something to be there, you can keep it, but you just have to make it land better and make it resonate more. So yes, we do, every decision and every editor will say, it's your book. But these people that we work with, all three of us have brilliant editors, are some of the best editors in publishing, are the best people in the world that know, and you want to listen, and we do. We value everything our editor says, but there are some things that are we'll take the hit that if they don't land well, they're so important to us that we will not only, we will keep them, we will replant them, but we will take the hit if they don't land well, because they're that important. But that is only a few very small things.
Yeah.
And I don't think we've been wrong yet about, I kept a very big thing in my last book, and it was the right choice. But did I ask them? Absolutely. And did we agonize over it? Yeah. But I kept it. And
Yeah, and
but you can't. So yes, you don't have to do everything.
when you're like, during my MFA program, I was taught, if you hear something once, just kind of note it. If you hear it from two different people who didn't know that the other person said it, like, you really need to address it. And I'm actually pretty good about not being precious about my work. I'll change almost anything. This one element that I knew I had to keep but was willing to change was like kind of surprising for me when that happened.
So, one of the things I'm always really impressed by when I read novels is like the research that goes into a fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And so my question is, how do you think about, what parts of your story require research and for you to go do that? And then how do you balance that with, for fiction, how much does it need to be accurate versus it being part of your story, especially for a book like this that's a little bit it's got that fantastical.
Yeah, we're all on FBI watch lists, I think. So like the side character in my book is going to be my example, Maverick, who wants to be this neurosurgeon. So like I dove into brain research, and I like was looking at all the different chemicals involved and like the structure of the brain, and like that part I wound up cutting so much from this book about the brain because it was not part of the story at all. But I just found it so interesting, and I was like, no, like, what are you doing? So you often don't know what you need to research until you're like in the middle of writing a scene, and then you're like, wait a second, how long does it take to get from Boston to the Cape? And then you'll have to Google map that. And then you'll be like, wait, is it a Friday night? Because then it's going to take a lot longer. So like those little things have to happen. But we also have copy editors and copywriters and proofreaders who go through and like note these things for us for fiction. So they're like, hey, and this was again, there were not 6 Tuesdays in the month of June. And I was
Or
like,
that store closed 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Change the name. Like, how
yeah.
did you know?
Or like this person got canceled, so
Right.
let's refresh. So yeah, I mean, like, you still try to be as accurate as you can with details in your research, but I'm probably the most guilty of like going off into a rabbit hole and then lifting my head and being like, oh, I didn't even need to do that.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah. Yeah? Any other questions? Yes.
Something I really loved about Apple was the dialogue. That it was like so natural. The characters they were young. So I'm wondering how much of that, in also this new story that has a lot of young characters, is intuitive. How much you have to like kind of, I don't know, look on Twitter and see what fictional voice are saying to know kind of how to get the voice of the character and have it sound natural. Because I imagine that would be very challenging.
Yeah, I mean, definitely when it comes to writing a teen voice, I will shout out my Dance Express students because they are teenagers, and I'm like, would this happen? And they're like, no. Okay, cool, I knew that. So they are very, very helpful when it comes to authenticating kind of that teen voice, but that's actually something that I usually need to revise. I kind of write a little more formally than what ends up being there. So as I'm like reading something out loud, I'm like, all right, there are way too many $10 words in this sentence. Let me pull some out and that kind of thing. And then also I noticed like a couple of years ago, I was like, you know what? Almost nobody greets anybody in a book. Like, so when you're reading a book, you're never gonna see like, hi, hey, how are you? Good, how are you? Great. Like all this stuff that's actually small talk and real, like that gets cut from books. And that's how I always start writing the dialogue, because it's somebody walking into a room and meeting another character. Like, of course you're gonna say hi. But then I was like, okay, I think I need to figure out ways around that. So that's like a challenge I've kind of given myself, is to not have people greet one another. And I'm pretty sure, I've never really seen it in a book since I noticed that too. So,
You probably edit that out of mine. I did. I'm quite
absolutely positive.
And I know we edit that out. We did.
Yeah.
and words change, that whatever word is in or new, you don't want to date your book, so you want to sound authentic to the age of the characters, so they're 17-year-olds, 19-year-olds, whatever. But you don't want to be like, hey, boo, you're my bae, you know, like, because that, then, you know, I have teens, they're older now at college, and they're like, no, we're not saying that anymore. But by the time you write a book to when it's on the shelf, it can be 2 years, sometimes 3, those words are done. So you don't want to just, you know, and then when we write text, you don't want to, we write the whole words out, not like you for Y-O-U, or, you know, it just doesn't resonate well. It doesn't land well in books, so I don't do that. I mean,
Part of it is definitely being a psychic to figure out like
oh, yeah.
what is good enough to keep in, or like what's an everlasting reference and that kind of thing, as opposed to like, my editor was like, I don't think you should put Love is Blind references in here. And I was like, I'm sure this Nick and Vanessa Lachey hosted reality
We're
TV
sorry,
show
Kevin. We're
is
sorry.
going to be an icon forever. And I actually think I might be right about this, but I took it out.
I have a teen daughter who just read my book recently, and her hot take on most YA contemporary is that the dialogue is actually cringe. So I guess most of it are getting it wrong. P.S. She gave me a 4 of 5 stars on Goodreads, not a 5 of 5 stars.
They're brutal.
Yeah.
My 17-year-old, when my last book said I was a life ruiner. It's the best thing a 17-year-old can tell you.
Your kid is like much nicer
She's
than my kid.
a life ruiner.
I think Evie feels the same, but not in that same like meaning.
Any other questions?
First, I do have to say that what you 3 have built together is incredible.
Thank you.
Really is. That's really something. And the question is about all this stuff all over the country now about taking books out of libraries, banning books.
Mm-hmm.
And is that having any effect on what you're all doing?
Wow.
Yeah,
It grieves us.
yeah.
Well, yeah, part of that, but is it affecting your writing? Or is it affecting?
No.
No,
Okay.
no. Again, it's impossible to predict the future, but there's so many kids who just don't have access to the books that they need access to, and if elements of that are in our books, we'll keep writing them, and hopefully they can find a way to get them if they need them.
We're all quite aware of it, though.
Yeah,
Like, I think you
it's
bring up
Well,
an
our
excellent
friends,
point.
you know,
Yeah.
our close friends, getting banned left and right
Yeah.
every day.
I think this book would be banned in Florida.
Yeah, that's a really good question.
We'll see next week. Well, I guess we'll find out.
Will I
Great. Super. Please do.
Good.
continue to?
Good.
If you get banned in Florida, you know you're doing something right.
That's
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah. Yep. Other questions?
So you sort of talked about like other books that you read during your process. Is there any other sort of like media you consume that affects it, so like music or TV or movies and stuff?
Yeah, I particularly love, like a lot of dystopian shows are really good. The Last of Us has been a big one for dialogue for me, because I think that the writing on that show is just phenomenal. Anything that has like that like ineffable quality to it, I will watch it. And I tend to, I have a spoiler alert, which I will not say about, it has nothing to do with my book, but I have a prediction during everything that I watch of whether the ending is going to be good or bad, and I make my husband pause, and I tell him whether it's going to be good or bad, and I'm almost always right.
She guesses everything but.
I ruin everything, but yeah, no, I love watching all the writing that we've been seeing on shows. I think it's just like the dialogue, and Station 11 was particularly wonderful when it came to like character relationships and stuff like that. Succession is just a study in marvel right now for me. I'm a huge, and I think like the way that serial television has changed in the last decade-ish has been really wonderful for that, because we get to spend a little bit more time with these characters. So seeing how they react to these situations, it's like, we're like, oh, well, of course they're gonna act like that, you know? Yeah.
very quick comment.
Sure.
All throughout Joan's life, we would often trade books back and forth. And I would say, you know, I sort of like write down who I thought did it or what the end was supposed to be. And I'm gonna tell you right now, Joan was correct 99.9% of the time, and I was correct the 0.1. So that's my observation of my, we were voracious readers, obviously still are, but it's like she opens the book and she knows what the end is gonna be.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it kind of stinks. Like, it's hard to watch something and be surprised.
Yeah.
But when I am, it's such a thrill. So.
And we hear about it.
Yes, and I'm like, you need
And
to watch
weird
this right
hours.
now.
Yeah.
I read this book immediately. Yeah.
So, I guess on the topic of media, is there like any music or any specific songs you listen to that you like associate with December and with Nick?
You're asking me a question. I wish I could answer this question.
We need to answer.
Yeah, they can answer it. I cannot listen to music while writing, first of all. I am not like, every single other author I know like builds like a really specific playlist as they're gearing up to write something and like share it with one another. And I am like the odd one out at the party. I cannot even begin to listen to something with lyrics. I teach dance, so the second I hear something, I just start dancing to it in my head, and then I'm so distracted, and then I'm mad. So neither one of them have like a song, but you guys can definitely take that because
We're gonna do this, yeah. So the first thing I do when I write a book is make a playlist because it helps me to get into the emotional aura of the book and into my characters. And okay, definitely for Nick in December, I would say Taylor Swift, Peace.
I think
Right, Allison? Right.
I kind yeah, but also I kind of think the soulful vibe of Lord Huron, Take Me Back to the Night
Absolutely.
we first met. Yeah, I think that would be a really good one here.
Lord Huron.
It's got that vibe. I think when Joan does blog posts and they ask that question, like, what's your theme song for your book?
I'm like,
Laura,
what's my theme
She
song?
complains
We
about
just
it every
pick it.
time. Then she cut, then we write it first.
we just write, we just pick songs for her.
Yeah.
It's fine.
I have a terrible taste in music too, so.
That's not true.
No, it is. It's okay.
No, I don't
like
really-
I said, I know my flaws. I'm okay with it.
I just, it's more like neutral. It's like, yeah, that's fine.
I have a dance teacher's playlist.
Mm.
Yep. Any other questions? All right. I don't know where we're at, but that seems good to me. Great. Well, thank you so much, everybody. It's really wonderful to see you all here.